You clicked on this podcast episode because of one of two things. You want to know if Ayurveda is completely and utterly woo-woo, or you realize that maybe my Indian ancestors were onto something thousands of years ago. Hey, and welcome back to another episode of the Global Health Pursuit podcast. This episode is a little bit different than my usual content, but I wanted to highlight it because the world of Ayurveda and Eastern medicine is just fascinating to me. Because what if we could prevent our body's aches and pains by being more thoughtful of what we consume mentally and physically? And as I say this, I feel like this is just a no-brainer. But living in a Western society, taking a daily pill to curb migraines or suppress heartburn is just easier, right? It's the quick solution. So in this episode, I got a chance to chat with Ayurvedic practitioner Austin Vantastic about all things Ayurveda, how the Western healthcare system let him down, how his body forced him to find Ayurveda, how he finally healed, and what your poop, eyeballs, and tongue can say about your health and more. My name is Hetal Baman, and this is the Global Health Pursuit. Couldn't help but think the world of Ayurveda is deeply connected to India, and it's part of my ancestry. What's interesting to me, I was just thinking about this today, where there's a whole stigma, right, around Indian families studying Western medicine and that becoming very prestigious. And I feel like there's a part of India that's just being like so detached to its roots.
I can see, as an American, Indians coming to America wanting to do something more than where they came from. Like you said, the prestige of doing Western medicine and the doctor and the white coat and all those things. And the imagery and making your parents proud and the familial generational honor and things like that go, I think it's understandable. And juxtaposed with that, I thought it was really interesting. When I was in India studying Ayurveda, so many Indians would come to me and be like, "Oh my God, you're here for Ayurveda? Like, tell me all about it." And I'm like, I'm here to learn it from you.
From you.
Yeah. And, a lot of that has to do with history, the English rule, and stomping out a lot of Indian traditions. And thank goodness Ayurveda survived that time period and is making a resurgence now. Yeah, I think it's beautiful. And I hope the future is embracing both sides. Western medicine is amazing for trauma care, cancer, like really severe life conditions. And Ayurveda is really beautiful for solving a lot of the mysterious kind of problem. You go to the doctor and you're like, "Oh, it hurts here." And they do all the tests and scans and they say, "Oh, nothing's wrong with you. Go home." And you're left in pain, So things like that Ayurveda is great for. And it's amazing for prevention. I've been practicing Ayurveda for 5 years and I've been seeing therapists for probably a couple more years longer than that. I don't know how many times I didn't get sick, thanks to Ayurveda. But there's just so many things you can learn and understand about your body where it's like you can see something coming out on the horizon and be like, let me make a change, to my diet or do something different today. You stay healthy. It's about, navigating this path of health.
I wanted to really dive into your story first because your story is really interesting in terms of just how you got into Ayurvedic practices. And when we first connected, you had told me that you had worked in film in the very beginning. So bring us back to that.
Yeah. Growing up, I chose film and television as a career, my career path. I moved to New York City at 21 and just hit the ground running, blazing full steam ahead. For those familiar with the film and television, I went from a production assistant to a director of photography in 4.5 years, which is insane, to move through kind of all the ranks up to heading the camera department for mostly TV shows I worked on and, some films and stuff like that. But the industry is, your work day on paper is 12 hours every day. If your call time's 9, your break time is 9, when you wrap. So that's a lot of pressure and that's a lot of stress. And that's just what's on paper. That doesn't include the commute to set and back from set and, all the things you got to try and figure out for yourself in the meantime. So working in film and television, a lot of pressure and stress from being a director of photography, dealing with the network, dealing with the directors, making the show right, my own personal life stress, emotional baggage, and the lifestyle that I was leading, all those factors built up to the point of me getting sick. And it was this kind of like weird pain in my left side. I thought, oh, maybe I pulled something, or, I've been carrying the camera around a lot.
Mm-hmm.
Kind of wrote it off. And then one night when I was falling asleep, it was just like, it felt like something inside me popped or broke. And I thought, left side, your stomach, you're like, did my appendix just explode? And I thought I was going to die in my bed that night.
Oh, gosh.
Yeah, it was brutal. So I called 911. I was getting tunnel vision and I was in bed. So I grabbed whatever I could to put on and walked out to the street. And I was like, if I pass out, at least they'll find me on the sidewalk. Luckily, I didn't pass out. The ambulance came quick and got me to the hospital and figured it out. But 4 hours later, they were like, oh, we think you had a kidney stone. And I was like, what? And so, 4 or 5 days went by and the pain hadn't subsided. And
you were still in immense pain at this point.
What happened that night happened once a month for the subsequent months. It was this shredding, ripping pain through my abdomen.
Oh, wow.
And I would be in bed for 2 or 3 days every time that happened. And then when I wasn't going through that severe pain, what it felt like was just kind of it was like a hot iron prod, on the inside, trying to push out. It was just this burning, pushing pain under my left rib. So that night at the hospital was the beginning of 4 or 5 months of doctor's tests, CT scans, ultrasound scans, x-ray. They did all the tests on me. Endoscopy, they couldn't figure out, they looked at everything. They were like, there's nothing broken, so you're fine.
Isn't that the worst feeling ever, though? Just going to the doctor and feeling pain and then them being like, no, you're fine. And you're like, well, I'm actually feeling something in my body, so I'm actually not fine. So can we figure it out?
Prior to this experience, every time I went to the doctor, it's like, oh, I got an earache, I broke up something, so it's pretty straightforward. So people who are familiar with the health landscape, are familiar with this type of story, but it was an entirely new dialogue for me. I was not familiar with people going to the doctors and being let down in this type of way. And I was like, you guys, you have all the machines, you're supposed to know. You're a doctor.
Where did Ayurveda come into play at this point?
Yeah, that was just a magical accident, honestly. So a year-ish, prior to all of this stuff happening, it was somebody who I actually went on a date with. We later ended up becoming friends. She was started telling me about this thing that to me at the time sounded so hippy-dippy. I was like, that's not real. She was telling me about Ayurveda. And so at the time of the conversation, I remember just being like, whatever. But what she mentioned was I completely transformed her life. And it was after, so I'd done all the tests and the endoscopy was the last thing that I had done. And I got the test results back from that. I was just sitting, at my kitchen table looking at my laptop, just defeated, so broken. And in this moment, that conversation came back to mind. And just her saying it completely transformed my life was the only thing I could think about. I don't have anything to lose. I've tried everything else. So I text her and I was like, yo, what was that thing you told me about?
Yo.
And she responded back to me and I looked up the woman who she referred to and I went and saw her, the next available appointment that I could. And that was the beginning of my journey with Ayurveda. Through her, it started with meditation. And then she referred me to an Ayurvedic therapist and he started changing my diet and telling me about my dosha and how I could cater to my health between the dietary recommendations and the meditation. I mean, within a week, I started feeling better. And within 3 months, I would say I had completely healed.
When you hear about things like this, without really experiencing it, you might think it's woo-woo, new age. But that's just so mind-blowing to me. So I want to take it back to the basics and just ask you, what is Ayurveda? You threw out some terms like dosha, where even as an Indian person, I don't even know.
Yeah. So Ayurveda is the 5,000 plus year old medical science from the greater Indian subcontinent. It's not defined by the country lines now. And the principles of Ayurveda are understanding like the body and how the body operates. So there's three doshas in the body: Vata, which is air and ether element; Pitta, which is fire and water element; and Kapha, which is water and earth element. So they figured the whole entire universe is made up of these five elements. You can see, obviously, the earth everywhere you go, the water everywhere you go, fire, is the sun; air, the wind that blows, and oxygen. And then ether is space, is nothingness. So we have space on earth, they translate a little bit differently, but, we can also equate it to actual physical outer space. So then those five elements and then the combination of those elements create the doshas. And then the doshas govern different systems in your body. And everybody is a combination of all three doshas. And everybody is going to have something that's more predominant in your body, which is why we say you are Pitta dosha or you are Kapha dosha. And it's not because you're missing Vata dosha. It just means that the Pitta is predominant or the Kapha is predominant. Just like in the world, all of the elements need, balance and counterbalance each other. Without one, there can't be the other. Inside your body, we want to keep the doshas in balance so that the body stays in harmony, our internal universe stays in harmony.
So how does that pertain to medicine? How does that pertain to healing?
Yeah, it's taken me a long time and all these years of study and working with people directly to understand the translation from like Ayurvedic principles to medical principles. Like I said, Ayurveda is very scientific, but it has a completely different paradigm of looking at and understanding the body than Western medicine. So there's not a one-to-one translation of like how things work. It's like we think of things like vitamins and minerals and proteins and nutrients and things like that, and then hormonal imbalances, and like this is how we get sick, and so we say, oh, well, if you have, low immunity, then you need to take vitamin C. Or if your APT is off and you need more energy, then you need to take vitamin B. And they're like, oh, well, the vitamin B is not working, so you need to take vitamin D. Unless you're getting constant blood tests and scans, how are you knowing what you're doing to your body and influencing it? And in Ayurveda, we look at the systems, the processes of the whole entire body, how on the large scale, like chunking, first you start with like Vata dosha, Pitta dosha, Kapha dosha, and you're like, well, what are they doing? And then, we can look at different things like Kapha is in the lungs and the heart and the throat. So it's like, are you having an issue there? And then if you're having an issue there, is Kapha dosha the culprit of that problem? Pitta dosha is in your digestive system. So it's your stomach, your spleen, your appendix, your liver, your gallbladder. So if you're having a digestive issue, then we look at Pitta dosha and we're like, oh, that's where the problem is happening. I'm having digestive issues, but who's causing the problem then? It could be Vata dosha could be causing the problem, but it's Pitta dosha who's under attack, And then Vata dosha lives in the colon and the large intestine. So you could be having problems there. So we chunk first by like trying to look at which dosha is out of balance based on the symptoms. And then we reverse the process of disease. The disease itself is kind of the symptom. We go backwards from the disease to who caused the problem in the first place. And then we correct it from both ends. We can work on the condition symptomatically, like what is the symptom that you're having? So it's like you're having digestive issues, then we can start to give you some digestive herbs, but then we can also give you therapies to correct the dosha. And then we can meet in the middle with a complete cure.
Wow. So, okay, you found Ayurveda and then you basically got obsessed with it and wanted to learn everything about it, right? Which makes sense, if it's something that totally transformed your life, you want to know more. What was some of the things that really drew you in when you were going through the learning process?
Right when I started healing, I was just like, what is this stuff? How do I get more? And I started, reading books and talking to everybody and trying to find resources that I could. I didn't know it would lead to me being a practitioner, an Ayurvedic practitioner. I was convinced I would stay in film and television for my life. But a few months later, I had this kind of like universe moment of like, oh, I could change my career and do something different. That inception moment was, I could change my career. I was like, I could help people heal through Ayurveda, and I could be an Ayurvedic chef and introduce people to Ayurveda through food. So that was the kind of like the initial thought process. And so I started taking steps towards that. So the first thing is I went to culinary school. I went to the Culinary Institute of America in Hyde Park, New York, which was an amazing experience. And I learned a lot, interestingly, about like food and digestion through that school and like how food works, kind of like the chemistry of the kitchen. So at that time, I was still just self-studied in Ayurveda. And then immediately after culinary school, I took my first year of Ayurvedic school, Ayurvedic health counselor consultant in the US. There's like 3 levels. So I did my first year, and then I went to India and I studied in India for 8 months. I was at 2 different Ayurvedic clinics there, one in Rajasthan and one in Mumbai. So I did just hundreds of clinical hours, lots of work. And then I came back to the US in the end of 2020. And I think it was in 21, I started my education as an Ayurvedic practitioner, which you could liken to like getting a master's degree. And it's much more, the Ayurvedic health counselor is more like diet, lifestyle, understanding the structure of the body, kind of like learning all the working pieces of Ayurvedic anatomy. And then this program, the Ayurvedic practitioner program, is more like, it's much more disease involved. You know, each month of school, which is focused on nervous diseases, mental diseases, reproductive diseases. I've had so many revelations, I feel like, in Ayurveda. It's hard to say that there's like one outstanding concept, but you know, modern science is starting to look more into epigenetics and individualized medicine, which is the Ayurvedic model from the beginning. Before we treat someone, we seek to understand that person. Who are you? What's going on with you? How are we going to help you heal? So it's always been the individualized approach. Ayurveda had a system of basically understanding epigenetics. That's the doshas. I mean, it's broken down. Again, it's like in these like kind of archaic language. But where I had the revelation is, so we have the 5 elements. The 5 elements combined create the 3 doshas. Those elements and the doshas and their interplays with each other create qualities, 20 qualities, the gunas. And it's 10 pairs of opposites. So 20 qualities in total. It's like hot, cold, dry, wet. But one day I was actually listening to a book on physics. It was called The Physics of God. Something in that book triggered this moment. And I was like, the 20 gunas are the 20 amino acids in a DNA strand.
Oh, wow.
I was like our DNA, our genetic expression, I was like, Ayurveda was onto this 5,000 years ago. And I was like, could this be real? And so I started doing some research.
Is this real life?
I was like, could they really have figured it out like epigenetics 5,000 years ago before, you know, a machine was ever invented to know that that body cells are even made out of DNA? And so I did a little bit of research, and just some preliminary study has shown that yes, that those 20 qualities are in fact Ayurveda's understanding of epigenetics and the DNA expression, and you know, how we either prevent or cause disease. It's like, how could 2 identical twins, one goes bald and one doesn't, one gets leukemia, the other doesn't? Like, how does that happen? And it's all because of nature versus nurture. It's like you're born with your nature. That's who you are. You're
Right.
born with your makeup from your parents. That's your genetic code. But how do you treat that genetic code throughout your lifetime will produce different results. It'll produce healthy results or it'll produce unhealthy results. And yeah, that's the whole entire Ayurvedic model. So that's been something that's extremely fascinated me. And I'd like to go a lot deeper on that, just to be able to kind of communicate that to other people. It's like, keep going back to the same thing. It's not woo-woo. It's not fake. It's not weird science. It's science.
Why is it so hard to comprehend? You know, as like somebody in Western society who has only experienced Western medicine, why is it so hard to comprehend that treatments like that of Ayurvedic treatments is science, like you're saying?
I think it's just communication, you know, the way we were raised, the way we learned things.
Like, for example, meditation, right? There's so many benefits to meditation, but people are like, what is that going to do for me?
I do have a pseudo scientific explanation for why meditation is good for you. Your pituitary gland sits in between the 2 hemispheres of your left and right brain. And that is like the governor of pretty much all the systems and processes inside your body. When you're stressed, your brain is creating electrical signals that are going back and forth. When you're stressed, it's like a storm. And your pituitary gland is sitting in the center of that. And I had always thought of it as kind of like air traffic control. So like it's on the center of the, tarmac. Tarmac. I was like, tamarack? What? So the air traffic control is like kind of in a prime location of the tarmac, and it's watching incoming planes and outgoing planes, right, for the brain. Right. And it's communicating to everybody like, you go here, you go there, and it's keeping order and everything organized. Well, now picture like it's cloudy and foggy, and like they don't have visual anymore, to the planes, but they still have their instruments. Well, now add lightning, and add whatever, like rain and hail. You're going to start disturbing all of the control's ability to organize everything. And so if you're stressed and all this electrical signals going back and forth over your pituitary gland, it's going to have a hard time functioning and saying this needs to go there and that needs to go there, and like keeping control of the whole entire system. So when we meditate, we actually harmonize the left and right hemispheres of the brain. And they have shown this in scans, whereas like there's, just this ton of confusion. And then, we go into like rhythmic, like sine waves, for how the brain is like operating. And there's, beta, alpha, theta, delta. It's like the different brain wavelengths and gamma, moving the brain from more chaotic places into more harmonious places. And then, the pituitary gland can be at rest and like organize things a lot better.
I like the air traffic controller analogy. That was good.
It's a pseudoscience explanation.
Where do you draw the line between treating with Ayurvedic practices and treating with Western medicine practices?
Yeah, I feel like the line can probably be moving back and forth. There's not like a static answer of where you start and stop Eastern and Western medicine practices. Ayurvedic medicine is amazing for prevention, and it's really great for solving like those mysterious illnesses that aren't life-threatening. In Western medicine, if there's a trauma and you have a life-threatening disease, your best course of action is to go with Western medicine. If you have stage 4 cancer and, you're terminal, get treatment through that system. And this would take a more individualized case-by-case understanding. But when you're ready, move in Ayurvedic supporting medicine. And once you are no longer terminal and you're stable, all the things that you should have done to prevent the cancer in the first place, now you have to do after the fact to heal the body and heal the tissues and heal those structures and things like that. So that's kind of like grand scale, but on a little bit smaller, like relatable scale for anybody at home, like practical. If you're sick and you have to go into work and your head is pounding and you're stuffy and groggy and you can't function, like take Dayquil and go to work, if you have to. Ideally, you'd stay at home and rest, right? But, the world that we live in, it's like we have to function. So you're not going to health jail if you take Dayquil, but you should also be taking herbs, treating, understanding like, well, how did you get sick in the first place? Like what caused the cold? And then so using Ayurvedic medicine to treat that at the same time. And, for me in my own life and, with my clients that I work with, that's, I carry that through. It's not like something I just say, it's like something I believe in. I had a client a few years ago. This was like relatively quick. It was when I was studying in India. So it was just after I'd finished school. She had chronic migraines for 2 or 3 years before we saw each other. At the time that we saw each other, she was having like 5 to 7 migraines a week and like cluster headaches. And she's like totally debilitated. She was taking all the maximum dosages of the different drugs that the doctors had given her to try and allay the problem. She'd gotten to an impasse. She was like, there's nowhere further for me to go in Western medicine. So we started working together. We did all the Ayurvedic stuff. We do the consultation, understand how it started, and kind of put all the pieces together and get a real map, basically, of her condition. And then started to navigate her way towards health. And pretty quickly, with some diet and some herb changes and lifestyle changes, she went down to like 3 days a week. She'd have a migraine, and the intensity went from a 10 to a 6, so it wasn't as debilitating. I don't remember what it was now, but whatever pills like she was taking to like relieve the migraines, I didn't stop her. I was like, go ahead. I was like, take it. If you're in pain, take it. But we're still doing the protocol. And after about 3.5 months of working with each other, she now gets a migraine a couple times a year.
I think the fact that you're not somebody who's saying, oh, don't take Western medicine at all, that's bad, it makes it so much more easy to implement because, hey, if you're in pain, sure, take some medicine that will alleviate it, but at the same time, let's continue. So you're an Ayurvedic practitioner and you're taking clients. What are the conditions that you see most of that your clients have?
It's so interesting that you asked that. So my marketing and advertising and a lot of my copy kind of is around like my condition. So I talk a lot about IBS and digestive issues, and that's kind of where I hang out. But I get clients with all sorts of different conditions. Of the last 4 clients I've just recently seen, 2 of them were IBS, and the other 2, one was cancer, and another one was actually similar to the migraines client. He's got vestibular migraines and tinnitus and vertigo, chronic, debilitating. So yeah, I get kind of like a myriad of different types of people that I attract. And I've worked with all sorts of different things, but I think usually people latch on to, I have a digestive issue or something like that, and these other symptoms. And so that's how kind of like the spread of clients that I get.
When a client comes to you, like what is your process in terms of the consultation? What does that look like? And then how do you educate your clients and motivate them to make these changes in their life?
When somebody first comes to me, usually it's a lot of back and forth conversation. It's like, oh, what do you have? How'd you get it? And da, da, da. And then they ask me, how I'm going to help them. I'm like, well, I don't know how I'm going to help you right now until we do a full consultation. But, I help people through diet, lifestyle, and herbs. And then usually also to meditation if they're open to it. If not, there's other psychological therapies that you can do in Ayurveda that are helpful, but I would say meditation among them is king. So yeah, somebody comes to me and let's say, we've gone through that process. So they say like, yes, let's do this. What happens then is I send them a health questionnaire. So they fill everything out. It's kind of just like you go to a doctor's office, like, what are you allergic to? What hurts? Or what are you coming to this visit for? Health history, those sorts of things. And then the consultation itself, it's about an hour and a half long process for most people. And we go really deep into all sorts of different weird symptoms and signs that they might have. And it's weird in the sense that they seem unrelated, but in Ayurveda, everything has a string. Do you have aches and pains? Do you have cracking and popping joints? People would think like, oh yeah, my joints crack all the time, but what does that mean? Well, it means you have like really high Vata, So it's like, we need to know that to diagnose and understand. So we go through that whole entire thing, what are you eating and how's your bowel movements? And, if anybody who's familiar with Ayurveda, we know we talk about poop a lot.
I love that.
Yeah, it's important. We need to know. And then I do a mixture of distant and local clients. So a lot of people who are virtual, I'll have them send me photos of their fingernails, their tongue, and then now more recently, I was doing it before, but I'm getting back into it again as a picture of your eye. This is Ayurvedic like iridology, so you could read the patterns in the iris and see what those mean, the implications for health. And so between the physiological evidence, the look of your fingernails and your tongue and your eyes, coupled with the interview, then with all that information, like I said, I can kind of get a real map of your state of imbalance. Where did it start? How did it start? How did it progress? Where are you at right now? And then I can create the pathway towards healing. And then the healing part with Ayurveda, so like I said, I use diet, lifestyle, herbs, meditation, but there's also stages to that. So the beginning stage is palliation, and it's usually a bit more gentle. What we're trying to do is bring the doshas back into alignment and harmony with each other. The reason you have disease is because they've gone out of harmony with each other. And I think of it as like bone setting, right? So it's like first we got to like soften the area, prepare the tissues, make sure everything is nice and gentle and ready. So that's the palliation stage. And then there's a detoxification stage, which is like you're going to put it in place.
Just reminded me of like a chiropractor.
Exactly. Yeah. You're just like crack it and you're like realign, It's a very aggressive, but also fast. That can be a few days to a week long process of resetting the doshas, the detoxification process. And then there's the rejuvenation process stage, which is now that things are back in line, we want to strengthen and tonify and bake in those results in a state of balance.
What about people who don't necessarily have huge issues? Have you seen any clients like that were just like, oh, I just want to know how to strengthen my diet or bring more energy into my life or something like that?
Yeah, I do get some people who are like Ayurveda curious. It's not as strong of a motivation, People who are like in pain, they're like, I'll do anything. It doesn't matter. So I do get those clients very rarely at this point. But for them, it's interesting too, even with those like just slight differences of how your body feels or like, I want to like make my digestion better. It's amazing how different you can feel when you follow Ayurvedic principles. So for one example, like me and my family, my mom is the only one who's really like bought in to Ayurveda. We'll do family parties or something like that, and people try and send me home with leftovers. And I just say no. I was like, I won't take food home. So one of the big things in Ayurveda is like not to eat leftover food, frozen, canned, shelf goods, preserved, things like that, because it's heavy food. It has a sitting energy. And so when you put food that's been sitting for a long time into your body, it's going to create this heaviness, this slowness, this static energy. And it can really mess up your digestive system. And for me, the Ayurvedic rule then is like you eat fresh food every single day, freshly cooked, breakfast, lunch, and dinner. You have fresh vegetables. If it's meat, then you get fresh meat. Whatever it is, it's just fresh. So nothing left over. And for me, having eaten that way for so long, now if I eat food that's left over for one day, I might be okay. But if I eat leftovers 2 days in a row, then it messes me up. And I just feel like, ugh, I feel heavy and I feel gross. So people who are doing this chronically, that's just how they understand their body to feel. If you're eating leftover and preserved and food out to go and all these things all the time, you don't know that once you optimize your digestion, you don't know what it feels like to have the energy, have the clarity of mind, have the focus, have all these things. It's like you're stuck in the mire and you don't know that you're there. So yeah, it's interesting, people who come with the digestive issues and then they start to do these things and they're like, wow, I can't believe how much energy I have. I can't believe how I feel. And I can't believe all these things. And it's like, you can't believe it because you just don't know because you haven't tried yet.
Wow. That makes me not want to eat my leftovers.
Yeah. It's honestly like, I feel bad and it's a big lifestyle change to, for me.
Always be making fresh food. You need to have the time to even do that.
Yeah, you need to have the time to do that. A lot of the health stuff online, it's like meal prepping and like having all your stuff ready to go. And it's healthier, but it's not that healthy. There's a lot to it, but the benefit, the payoff is monumental. I don't like wasting food. So it's been a learning curve to make sure it's like, how do you cook just enough for each meal? And usually a breakfast is simple because I can make a very small breakfast and that's fine. And then lunch, if there's anything left over, I can eat for dinner. So leftover means leftover night. So you can eat lunch and dinner, the same food the same day, and that's okay. But if you put it in the fridge and it goes overnight, that's considered leftover. I've conceded a little bit and I'll eat a 1 day leftover so I don't waste food, but I won't go beyond that because then now I'm being wasteful of my health.
That's interesting to say it that way.
Yeah.
Wow. So for anybody who's listening in who might be curious about possibly changing their life through Ayurvedic practices, are you currently open to new clients?
Yeah, absolutely. I wish I could help everybody in the world. I do take new clients. And if anybody wants to connect with me, Ayurveda4.us, but it's Ayurveda for us. They can find me on my website and contact me through that. And so, yeah, for people who are Ayurveda curious, and same, with my website, you can go on there just for blog information and tips and things. And then to work with me, the best way to reach me is through the website.
Amazing. And I'll put all of the links in the description so that it's easy for you guys to find all of that information. Thank you so much, Austin.
Hey, thank you so much, Hazel. It's been such a pleasure.
Ethics and policies of the US government. Maybe in a good way or a bad way, depends on how you see things. But I'm just here to share some dialogue with an expert who's been on both sides of the equation. According to the AmericanImmigrationCouncil.org, U.S. immigration law is based on the following principles: the reunification of families, admitting immigrants with skills that are valuable to the U.S. economy, humanitarian protections, and promoting diversity. Now,